So I think the first lockdown was definitely harder than the second. And the reason I say that is because it was new to everybody, up and down the country. Nobody, the words pandemic and bubbles and zones wasn't on anybody's radar. But I think the main challenge for schools and school leaders was this immediate move to remote learning. And we at Coptal, we weren't quite set up for that. So that was a real challenge for us, just trying to kind of move from face to face, all the relationships you build with young people, to then have to do that behind a computer screen. Students also miss school, and actually we miss them. So, that was like, oh, we just want to be back to normal. We ran a micro school for students who really needed to be on site. Your more vulnerable students as well. So so that was good because we did have some face-to-face interaction. The isolation for young people, being at home and not being with their friends and not being with the teachers, that was really hard. I think in terms of getting used to things, in terms of remote learning, we did find that by the second one, we knew what we were doing and we felt a lot more confident. And I think that the students actually got into a bit of a rhythm as well, so they knew what to expect. But if I talk a little bit about mental health and well-being, I think, people might say, oh, this is crazy, but I do think the weather helps a lot with people's well-being and, just being able to walk and, get out a bit. So weather was amazing on the first lockdown, not so great on the second one. So whilst on the one hand, we'd really finessed online learning, on the other hand, young people being cooped up indoors, not having the opportunity to kind of be out and about once they'd finished their learning, I think that kind of impacted a bit more on their mental health and well-being. And that is something that we became acutely aware of, and something that we know at Coptal that we need to put in systems and structures to really help our young people with that. So we found a skill set that we didn't even know we had, just in terms of zoning a school and really thinking quite strategically about where students would be based, in terms of within the school. So for all schools, we went to bubbles and zones. So we had to have those physical adaptations around the school. And if you walk the school a bit later on, you will see that we've got markings on the floor that will say this is a year 7 zone, that's a year 9 zone. There'll be barriers that actually physically cordon off the area. You will see that we had to change how we open and close doors, so now it's all automatic. It's, you don't touch it, it's just the hand sensor. I think one of the biggest challenges though, in terms of adapting, was when the government instructed schools to do the lateral flow testing. We had to repurpose a couple of classrooms, and we had to put in place a system of testing, which was a bit of a military operation, but we got it right. We had to get volunteers, we had to use existing staff, we had to do rotas of young people coming in to be tested. We've had to repurpose another area, which is our isolation booth, so that when the pandemic was at its height, if a young person presented with symptoms, they'd have to go somewhere specific. They've got their own toilet. It's like a military operation. Things like each year group having their own area to eat, having their own outside space or big space. I think one of the challenges for the students is being in those bubbles means that they've lost that whole interaction with the school community. And for my year 7s in particular, who, for some of them, they've never seen other parts of the school because all they've known is, I'm in this bubble. So the adaptations are still in place. And even though the lockdown is starting to lift quite slightly, we remain in our bubbles and in our zones. And fortunately, we haven't had any cases since we've come back in March, i.e. we haven't had to send bubbles home, so that's been good. Yeah, a sense of optimism, I think. That if I talk about students first, the overriding majority of them are happy that it's been eased and we're beginning to get back to some kind of normality. However, there are some students that say to me, I really liked remote learning, and I really like just being in our little zone and our bubble. So it's a slight mixed economy, but the significant majority have welcomed, the students have welcomed the fact that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they can see that, come September, hopefully our whole school community is back where it needs to be. Staff equally are, I think a word that we use is we're desperate to get back to what we've always done, yeah? Things like having whole school assemblies. We haven't had those for over a year. And we are desperate to have that kind of interaction with our young people. So likewise, staff can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they too are optimistic and hopeful that come September we'll be back where we are. Historically, the message we've been getting from the government is not always backed up by science and by the evidence. And I think schools are often put in very difficult positions because, we're told you have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to do that. And of course, we by and large do what we're told. But, having the evidence to back up decisions would make school and college leaders feel a little bit more confident in the government's decisions. I think my worry is that, if we go for a total lifting, that cases might begin to rise. I'm not uber confident, I'm not uber confident that we've got all our ducks in order to have that 21st of June total lift. But I am confident that the robust measures we have within school will actually help us should we have an outbreak, should we have a whole year group go home and so on and so forth. We have had some additional funding, okay? So we have got additional funding to help with things like hand sanitizers and a bit of repurposing. But we've got to undo that when lockdown is lifted, and we may have to begin some additional repurposing. There will be no additional funds for that. If I could plea with the DFE to not just pay lip service to funding for mental health and well-being, I think that would be my big ask, because we're coming out of a global pandemic. We've got young people who have been cooped up at home, who have spent an inordinate amount of time once they've done their schoolwork on social media, and all the messages and stuff that young people get. I think that has significantly impacted a lot of young people. And schools don't currently have the resources. They don't have the resources to have, a whole host of mental health practitioners in schools. And I think we would benefit from that. My chair of governors, who is amazing, she did say, I would like to nominate you for head teacher of the year, because that's part of the process. You have to inform the person you're nominating. And I said, oh, yeah, sounds great, that would be lovely. And then I came into school one morning and my PA and one of my assistant heads said, have you seen your inbox? And I said, no. And they were like just grinning and smiling. And then I had a look and it just said that I'd been nominated. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is just like, it was just like, I thought the fact that I've got shortlisted was fantastic. I looked at the list, obviously, and I could see, I think there were 6 men and 2 women. I obviously would have loved to have won, I'm not going to say, but I thought, well, if it's not me, I'd love it to be the other female nominee. So then on the night, again, what usually happens for the TES Awards, it's in an amazing hotel and it's all very fancy, and this was by Zoom. It's okay. You know, it was by Zoom, but what made it really lovely was that members of my senior team zoomed in and my governors zoomed in, and then the announcement was made. You know, there is a picture of me going like, yes. I was overwhelmed. I'm not gonna lie. I was really overwhelmed. You know, I was humbled to have, you know, and the things that the judges said about the school and about me was just like, you know, I love what I do, you know, I love my job. I love being a head teacher here at Coptal, and to then have that recognition, you know, I talk about tying a bow on it, and for me that just kind of tied a bow on my career, you know, to date just then. So and I hope, you know, the students were lovely, came running up to me the next day. You know, I hoped that I would be, you know, a role model for the girls, you know, and I hoped that I would make, you know, the school feel proud. And that's for me, that was amazing, you know, that the girls were, Miss, we heard that you won. So how did it make me feel? Yeah, really overwhelmed. I was delighted. I still kind of talk about it because why not, you know, why not? And it's brought a lot of positivity to the school, you know. It's that recognition of, you know, working really hard but doing something you love, and then tying a bow on it and somebody saying you're head teacher of the year. So yeah, it was amazing.